We're going to look at how bias can wreck sample surveys in a variety of ways, and that randomness, although it seems like it's sometimes the same effect, is actually an okay thing. Going through some of the paragraph here. When a sample does not give all members of the population an equal chance of being represented, the sample suffers from undercoverage. So if everyone doesn't have an equal chance of being picked for some reason or another, there is undercoverage. This biases any conclusions about the population that you can draw from the sample. Now, bias just means that it's going to cause your data to be not truly representative of everyone, not truly representative of the whole population. Continuing on, when a sample is missing results from individuals who choose not to participate, the sample suffers from non-response because people are not responding. The effect on the results is sometimes called non-response bias. It just means that people who don't respond, if there's a reason they don't respond, might be causing a slight change in your results that make it not representative of the population. This biases any conclusion about the population you can draw from the sample. And then finally, bias can also come from poorly worded questions. So there's a handful of ways that you can introduce bias into your sample. Let's take a look at that population and sample diagram in a slightly different light that includes the opportunity for bias to creep in. You start out with your large circle, which is your population that you're interested in, and that includes all people that could be part of that population. Part of your population is going to be hard to reach or impossible to reach, and that's going to be called undercoverage. If you were doing a phone survey, those might be the people that don't have a phone, or depending on how you're doing your phone survey, maybe an unlisted number. If you're going door to door, maybe it's the people who are homeless. Or maybe you go door to door at noon and those people are working, so they're not able to respond to your survey. So anyone that doesn't really have a fair shot of being selected to be in your survey for one reason or another is going to be your undercoverage. And then the rest of the population is going to be someone that could potentially end up in your sample. So you're going to ask some number of people. So those are the people that are selected for your sample, right down here. There's lots of people who could have been selected but just weren't because of randomness. So this person, this person, this person, so forth. These people out here, it's just random selection that caused them to be missed. There's nothing in particular that they did. They had a phone, just like the people who were selected. Randomness just fell to select these people. So within the people that are selected for your sample, some of them are going to respond and some of them aren't. The people who don't respond is your non-response. They're the ones that you talked to, you asked, you called them perhaps, and they either didn't answer or they weren't interested in participating in your survey for some reason. And then the small subset over here, the people who were eligible to be asked in your population, did get selected, and did respond, that's your sample. So when you ask, what is the sample? Is it people I asked or people that responded? It's the people who responded. Even of those people who do respond, you do have to be careful about potential bias from a few things. Bad questions. So if you ask a question that's either misleading or poorly worded in some way, you could bias their results. You could also get bias from people who lie or forget things. For example, if you're asking about seatbelts and whether you wear them or not, society tends to expect that you wear your seatbelt more often than not. And so if someone doesn't wear their seatbelt, they might be inclined to lie about it. Some people also tend to exaggerate certain numbers in the past. They might forget that, oh, well, I spent this much money instead of some smaller number, things like that. So if you ask questions about what you did last week or what you did yesterday, people might forget and give you wrong answers. The thing about randomness, we talked about the fact that some of these people weren't selected because of randomness, is that it's predictable. We can mathematically expect certain things when we're being random. If we're trying to estimate the actual parameter, so let's say we asked people their height, and we want to know the actual average height of the population, and let's say it's right here in the middle, well, some of our samples are going to end up with a few more shorter people than taller people. So we're going to have a few samples that are going to be a little bit low. They're going to estimate low. We're going to have some that have a few more tall people, so we're going to estimate a little high. Some will be just barely high, some just barely low, and so forth. And if you were to repeat this many times, what you're going to find is you're going to end up with something that looks kind of like a unimodal symmetrical distribution, if you were to make a histogram of that, for example. And you're going to get a roughly normal curve that kind of forms around the actual parameter, the actual, in this case, mean that you're interested in. So again, it is randomness, and sometimes the people that are selected are going to be very slanted one way or the other, very tall, very short, very Democratic, very Republican, whatever it might be. But if you do repeat this process of sampling many times, you're eventually going to end up with something that averages out to be pretty much right on. So a quick little process when you encounter a new survey question, or you want to develop a new way to sample people. First, define the population of interest. Who do you want to know something about? Is it the school? Is it the state? Is it the world? You need to make sure you figure out who you are trying to understand, because it's going to be impossible to do the rest of it unless you've narrowed down who is it that you care about. Second thing, think about the wording of your survey question and its content. If you're giving surveys to human beings and you're asking them to fill this out, you have to look at whether the wording pushes people towards one answer or another, and if the content makes it something that people might lie about, as we talked about, like with seatbelts. You could also imagine things like drug use or a variety of other topics that people are inclined to not be totally open about in a survey. Number 3, decide between a census and a sample. If you can easily ask every individual in the population, let's say it's a classroom, if you can easily ask everyone in the classroom, that's the way to go. Don't do a sample when you can easily do a census. However, if you have a much larger population and it's going to be difficult to do a census to ask everyone, let's say the state, it's hard to ask everyone in the state, then you might want to sample, and in which case you need to figure out which representative sampling technique is going to work for you. So going down here, if you are using a sample, think through your chosen technique. What could you have undercoverage from? Could it be the time of day that certain people aren't available? Maybe if you're doing your sampling in front of a store, people that don't go to that store are going to be missed. The phones, again, if you don't have a phone or you tend not to answer your phone or you have caller ID and screen out calls, things like that. Think about what might cause non-response. Certain people in certain cases are more likely to respond to a survey or a questionnaire of some sort than other people. There are certain people who just have no interest in that sort of thing, and that not getting their opinions could potentially change your data. So non-response is something to be careful of. We're not going to talk about this margin of error yet. And number 7, when you present your conclusions, be very open about the problems you had in your sampling. Well, we asked 50 people to participate. We actually only heard back from 30, so we had a 40% non-response rate. And that could potentially affect your data. But just make sure you're open and honest about what happened in your survey.